Уважаемые коллеги, друзья, рады приветствовать вас на нашем сегодняшнем мероприятии в рамках Гайдаровского форума. Сегодня мы обсуждаем таможенное администрирование в России. Разрешите мне в первую очередь представить участников нашей сегодняшней сессии. Я Синельников Сергей Германович, ректор Академии внешней торговли.
Good afternoon. We have the head of the Federal Customs Service. We have Timur Igorevich Maximov, deputy head of the Ministry of Economic Development. Isaev Pavel Anatolyevich, the deputy advisor to the CEO, Severstal. And as we are hosting, Karin Balandin is sitting here because there is not enough room here on stage. And Ilya Trunin, deputy head of Ministry of Finance, and Vitaly Ruvilo. I think I've mentioned everyone, and the last session I failed to introduce one person. It was confusion, but now we are good. And now let's get into the agenda. In a way of short introduction, I would like to say that the customs administration in Russia, we have been improving that for many years, and this challenge is very, very important. It's important in terms of the fiscal matters, but also look at the numbers. The import duties, unlike export duties, only 0.6% of the GDP. 0.6% of the GDP would be 2 percentage points for the VAT tax. VAT tax is collected usually 6% of the GDP. 0.3 is rate, so 2%. And this year we've increased the value-added tax by 2 points. And it's about the same as we are collecting customs duties. Macroeconomically speaking, it is important, however, not critical. Why this is such an important topic? Because the administration itself is very important. It tells us that inclusion of the Russia in International Division of Labor without being a part of the VAT. No, it's not happening. It's obvious. The exchange in technologies and in the goods and merchandise, there'll be no development. And the customs administration is one of the key instruments which may either slow down these processes or to promote these processes, because the countries are competing very often by the level of their customs administration. And this is why we are here today and we are discussing this topic. And we would like to see what will be the customs administration in the future. Not now, not today, but in the future. And if we'll take a look at the state of affairs and where we are today in terms of competition, please show us the slide, this one. We can see that, as a matter of fact, we are not in a very good situation in terms of the logistics index and doing business index. In doing business, we haven't attained our goal yet, which we aimed for in 2018, which is to be in the ranking number 17. Why? One of our today's goals is to try to find an answer to a question: why this is the case and what should be done so that this lag could be breached. Next slide, please. This is a continuation of the previous pictures of where we are on the map of the world. And here we can see the same commands and the same information that we've seen in the last page, albeit in a graphic mode, so you can see the geographical scope. We are neighboring with other countries which are not super developed. There is a room for growth. It's very obvious, and it's a given situation which has to be dealt with and overcome. What do our authorities do in this regard? As you can see, different materials and different programs, they've been adopted in multitudes. I will not be naming all the documents. If you are on this topic, you know what I'm speaking about. We have prepared a presentation for this forum, and this presentation, I would say, is quite provocative, because in this presentation we are addressing addressing some shortcomings of what we have today, even some shortcomings of these documents, which simply conserving the situation with some slight changes. And we're trying to find an answer. What could be more radical to break the status quo, which we're not happy with? And before engaging into our presentation, I would like to ask questions to Vladimir about what is your opinion before we will start discussing what has to be done in terms of the public service and administration. But you are responsible for that as a head of the Federal Customs Service in Russia. Why we are in such a low levels and what has to be done? Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers of the forum, as we have the opportunity to discuss these matters of the customs administration today. And I think it will be only good to say that our dialogue with actors in foreign economic trade and with professionals who are working in customs regulation, we have an ongoing dialogue with them, and more constructive and more productive for that matter. And I believe that our joint efforts also should be included in the new customs codes for the Eurasian Economic Union and the new law on customs regulations in Russia, and integrated programs of developing federal customs service until 2020. And it's not a coincidence that the main principle with which we integrate these realize these integrated programs is simplicity for business convenience, efficiency, and safety for the state. And also it has a separate section entitled 10 Steps to Accommodate Business. And following this principle, the Federal Customs Service of the Russian Federation is aiming at digitalization, automation in all aspects of this activity. We have to digitize all the customs procedures and regimes. But since Sergey has asked me the question of what is going on with our ratings, as for the rating to evaluate customs administration, it does not exist as such. Possibly you are speaking about a research which has been done by the World Bank experts. Indeed, we are not ranking very high in this presentation by the World Bank, and until the last year of 2018, the measurements which has been done by the World Bank experts, several tens of thousands of questions, several dozens of hours, people believe that this is the time that it takes to go through customs clearance. And this year, after our persistent requests, the intel on that time has been done, and I have to say that for import it's 66 hours, and from these hours the customs share, so to speak, is only 4. That's for import. And for export, for export 66 hours, for importation 72 hours, and the share of the customs procedures is 8 hours out of 72 hours. So it only makes sense. Where do we have this time reserves? And our reserves that we need to develop our port infrastructure. We have to work and expanding our cross-border crossing points. We have to think about the driveways. We have to improve the work of the seaports administrations and organizations which are doing the loading and unloading works and logisticals fields and activities in ports. And due to our functionality and our competencies, we have been working on these areas. And my evaluation is we still have reserve of time. And I would like to draw your attention to the fact that when you think about doing business and when you do direct evaluations about the customs efficiencies, this would not be very proportional. And now, briefly, with your permission, I would like to mention of what the what the customs administration is all about in Russia today and how it looks in reality. I'll begin by saying that all customs procedures are digitized. Customs services have a very wide network of information and telecom systems. At our disposal, we have 81 pieces of software, 67 databases, enabling us on a daily basis to process from 12 to 15,000 e-declarations, electronic declarations, and to ensure 100% electronic declaring for goods and services. And the level of automation of our processes presently can be specified by the share of the customs declarations, so which we are registering and issuing in automatic mode. And according to 2018, on average, for import, we have been processing. Just give me a second. For importation, 36% of the declarations. For export, 83% of declarations are being registered automatically. The average registration time, 3 minutes. Speaking about the automatic release, of course, for the risk-free deliveries and for those involved in exportation and importation operations perceived as low risk. Situation is as follows. For importation, 27%. For export, 46%. On average, if you take the whole bulk of declarations, 39% are being processed automatically of all declarations, and 29% are low risk, are being issued automatically. Average time would be 5 minutes per declaration. In accordance with our integrated program, we do have some targets and goals. By 2020, we are planning that 99% of all declarations will be processed and released or registered automatically, and 80% of the declarations will be these are low-risk declarations, will be automatically released. And on top of that, we are assuming that the share of the low-risk declarations will be 80% of the total amount of declarations, and in this way, 64% of declaration massive will be automatically released. Presently, average release time for commodities batch for importation is 1 hour 29 minutes for the whole declaration massive, for the whole bulk, and for the exportation 40 minutes. Based on digital technologies, we've implemented our risk management system, which has been applied, and this approach is based on assigning categories to the foreign economic activities participants. And in the last 3 years, the number of the those who declare with a low risk has grown threefold, and now it's 7,800 to 8,200. But most importantly, that they account for 60% of the total declaration volume, in 80% of all payments which we are transferring to the federal budget. Using digital technologies, we were able to change our relations with the federal executive authority bodies in terms of the remote access to their information resources. And right now, we can, in automatic mode, get access to information resources of the 32 federal executive bodies, and work for 18 focus areas are still work in progress. And you can imagine that in this system, on a daily basis, 30 million messages are being formed, and the average time of approval is no more than 1 minute. All of this helped us to decrease administrative burden on a business, and it's enough to say that if we consider such a costly measure of the risk minimizing as visual inspection, then generally in 2018 we've held 1.6% of inspections from the total volume to be declared, and 0.5% had been subject to the commodities batch has been inspected, which had been moved by the low risk declarations applicants. This level of digitalization enables us to move into the wide-scale reforms of our customs body. Many who are present here today, you are aware of the situation which had been back in 2017. We had 672 places or points for the customs declarations, which usually were located on private property. Since 2018 through 2020, we have identified three stage of our reform, and we will have only 16 locations of the customs procession on a public area, 8 centers for the e-declarations. Electronic customs will be matching with the federal districts in terms of their location, and also 3 maritime centers for the electronic declaration, one in St. Petersburg, the port of Novorossiysk, and Vladivostok, the center for the e-declaration in the Kaliningrad region and the Moscow region. Yet another center for the e-declarations of the energy and excise customs, and the electronic declaration centers of the Moscow aviation hub. Now, what do we achieve by doing that? First of all, we are getting away from the private lands and private properties, and we are breaking a physical contact between the inspectors and the applicants. We believe that this will result in more objective and independent decision-making process by our officials, and we, in a more homogeneous way, will be able to divide the workloads on the releasing inspectors. We will make their decision-making ever more independent. We, in a big way, will decrease the corruption risks, and I believe that eventually this will impact on the speed of the customs clearance and will result in more customs payments being forwarded into the federal budget. The next question is, what will be next? Presently, we are very proactive in elaborating a strategy 2030. That is the development of the Russian Customs Service, and on a number of occasions, I've been speaking about that. All the participants of this meeting are welcome to be a part of the drafting 2030 strategy. I suppose that for the sake of time, I will finish my very short presentations. I can wrap up, or I can keep. Actually, later we'll go back to you and we'll ask you questions. I have a question. Timur Igorevich, could you please comment on? Sergey, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak today and to share our opinions. It's a very, very relevant topic that we are discussing, and given the priorities identified by the presidential executive orders, we see that external demand is one of the potential drivers of our economic growth. And in this regard, the way the whole foreign economic activity system is working will be a decisive factor. I will begin with very technical nuances, which are very important, however, because the way we've opened this session, it will define our discussion. You said that revenues from the import duties are not that significant, and volumes are small in the total volume of budgetary revenues. I cannot agree with you on that. correct me if I'm wrong, but after 2018 about 60 trillion. And half of them would be the foreign trade revenues. I'm not only speaking about the levies and duties, but it's an excise and other things. I realize that later you will be speaking about the expediency of collecting VAT at the border, at the cross-border points. But out of this 6 trillion rubles, about 3 of them, even about half of them, even a little bit more than half of them are being formed at the borders. And in the 16 trillion national budget, I would say it's quite a big share. It's a first technical aspect. The second technical aspect, whenever we speak about methodology of evaluation, we're saying that we are looking at the ratings by the World Bank, and we're seeing where we are against other. It's also very important because the indicator is not the quality of customs administration, but the cross-border trading. It's an integrating indicator. It has a number of other points. Why I'm saying that? Because it is important for the right identification of our problem and getting the right solution. So this indicator is not only about customs administration.
Now, about specifically where we are and where are we heading for. Here I must tell you that for the recent 2.5 years, we experienced a significant and strong breakthrough. A lot of things changed. First, the relations between customs and business changed, and this, of course, can be confirmed also by the representatives of the Russian business present here, and it helps a lot in problem solving. Of course, there are a lot of problems still, but we see positive dynamics. And what are the signs of these dynamics? When Vladimir Ivanovich came to Federal Customs Service, first and foremost, he gathered all the documents in a comprehensive development program to have a systematic approach to the program. All measurements, all events related to the improvement should be gathered in one place. They should be clear, they should be transparent, and they should be with terms and timelines and deadlines. And now we've overcome the summit. We're over the hill with this program. The program is calculated till the end of 2020. Now we have 2019, and year 19, year 20 are the years of our summing up and drawing conclusions. What is specific about this program? There are 2 global bus areas, digitalization of everything. Everything should go digital, all processes, all customs procedures, and then automate it as much as possible for different reasons. First, to improve speed, and second, to eliminate all possible risk factors. And what is our service is doing right now? We, as the Ministry of Economic Development, being responsible both for the economic growth and foreign economic policy, we agree with this conceptually with this program, and we feel very comfortable about all these events. The main thing now is to implement all this, to fulfill it, because we are good in writing plans. The only thing is how to properly implement them. And here, basically, I don't see any big issues. We see the dynamics, the trends in terms of their realization. We don't expect big problems, and we hope everything will be brought to the end. And in principle, all global things which could be done, which could give us a breakthrough, they are there. And then we will have an issue of some fine-tuning, refining, and we're all very well aware that there is a separate national project, international cooperation in exports. There is a separate section of international measures. A number of events are planned there in order to speed up customs operations and cost reduction. But again, all global things are sitting in the customs service program. We can only play there with fine-tuning of smaller things and details. What comes next? The question is, what shall we do next after we realize everything and arrive in 2020? I don't see any big risks with the events. The majority of them is in the responsibility of the Federal Customs Service, and what Vladimir Ivanovich mentioned, we will require the involvement of the external control of business itself. Vladimir Ivanovich tells us that we are going to automate it all, given that we will have only fair partners in our program. There's only one thing which needs to be thought through. we can go the way of fine-tuning and changing our perception of business, or we can expect the reciprocal movements from business side. And Vladimir Ivanovich tells us that the share of green sector is growing, but till now it was growing due to the fine-tuning of criteria from the part of the customs service. That has its limits. After we finish the fine-tuning, whether we will have still 8% at the outcome. And here we should involve maybe other levers to ensure the achievement of this goal. Now, what happens after 2020? The situation which is existing now not only in our department but also in other services in terms of the arrangement of goods and procedures in the area of economic activity is not as simple and easy as it might seem. Also based on our experience, now we see the global reform which is going on, and it is carried out as an upgrading of a plane on the fly. The plane should fly, but at the same time we should replace some components and parts, and we should undergo really a serious modernization, but still the plane should fly and come to a proper place. Well, and should be done all on the fly in the real mode, which is very complex and hard. Another problem which requires much more attention, other than just focusing on the quality of the customs duties and procedures. This is a problem of comprehensive interaction of all controllers, all federal agencies which take part in the sometimes it seems to be good, but this problem requires other solutions and other level of management. And our national projects are supervised by vice prime ministers, but not only government bodies, but also private sector is involved here. We all know how long this story lasts with the waybill in electronic form, because there is only one monopoly, a big company, and this part should also be tied to, it requires ties between state and business, and it requires different approaches to solve these problems. I would like Pavel Anatolyevich to speak as a representative of business, and then Ilya Vyacheslamovich and Vitaly Yurovich, please speak after, if you don't mind. The same question to you. It's on your discretion. Same question. Evaluation of the current situation and your standpoint. What do we lack in the current situation? I remember today's plenary session with the participation of Mr. Gref and Mr. Sobyanin. It was said that we are in a very difficult economic situation. There are only three generalized sources to achieve any growth of GDP. First is labor resources, which are shrinking, as in it's obvious, and we can't put on this on stake, and also the investment and the labor efficiency. These two things are provided by business. And my opinion, in these conditions, all federal executive bodies should be redirected and refocused to do their best to help business to achieve these goals. With Vladimir Ivanovich succeeded to change the attitude in the negotiations between business and customs service, and no one questions that. But many times I heard from the colleagues, not only in the customs service but also in the Ministry of Finance, the phrase that, look, it's not our business to provide profit for business, that's their job. But I believe that in the current situation, in the current macroeconomic situations in our country, we absolutely need that the federal service and the Ministry of Finance set their tasks, their goals to support as much as possible fair entrepreneurs and businessmen. And we should direct also all regulatory acts and documents and also practices in this area. Of course, it's very hard to split between fair and unfair businessmen, but there are all possible criteria here, and we should move away from the inertia approach that business would do everything on its own. Even if we say the phrase that the federal customs achieved 6 trillion income, but that's not the merit of the Federal Customs Service. It's the merit of business. But we have to remember that the Federal Customs Service, of course, made a very great contribution, but it is all stated on business. It's all rested on business. And if we want to get really sustainable development of our country, I believe we need to be more focused, especially to the mindset of our customs servants. Every official in our service should think all the time what to do better for business, how to support business better. I see faces, I see your smiling faces, but we can't go without it. If our task would be to avoid unfair business, we just be focused on that. But we won't get any 3% of GDP. We do not get anything at all. And I believe this is a very important thing. That's my idea, what I feel lacking in the terms of the moral climate. We all think that an entrepreneur is a person who would do everything for the sake of his profit. But prevent this, overcome this thing, and provide support. This is in our powers and the powers of our Federal Customs Service. Thank you very much, Vitaly. I'd like to exacerbate a little bit and even correct you. You mentioned just that the Federal Customs Service collects payments. All the time we say that the tax service raises taxes. Yegor Gaidar wrote a book once, and you know where do we get this? It's from the Tatar yoke, when the bounty was collected from our country. But when in Europe they have self-control, and these services, they do not raise levies or levy taxes, they just control collection. In 2030s, they wanted to say that these services control. They do not collect. They just control Control, collect is not right word. They control people pay these taxes, and that would be the right words. Dear colleagues, let's move to the presentation of our colleagues from the Academy of the Public Service Administration. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to start with the international assessments. Again, coming back to the same topic. There are a lot of claims to the correctness of ways to calculate doing business rating of Russia. They are well known, and in some part they are justified. Well, the Sergei Yuryevich mentioned also for us today the ratings of the World Economic Forum, and these are slightly different measurements. They are made by entrepreneurs, by business, and the logistics efficiency rating evaluates separately the customs formalities on borders, and according to these evaluations, Russia does not rank too high either. On this slide, we see a picture from the site of Organization of Economic Development and Cooperation. Here we can see the evaluations of the activities of customs service in different areas, and as you may see, Russia is coming closer to best global standards in many areas, and in 2 of these areas it is even ahead of the global trends of global practices. In particular, goods classification, decision-making and publishing of rules and regulations, and the claiming procedures. The claiming procedures are coming much faster in our case and cheaper versus other countries, many other countries. In many other areas, though, we have still reserves and ways to improve. And in a special bullet is focused in the left bottom corner is measurement of business process efficiency based on the single window, follow-up control, and authorized economic operator. Here, as you may see, we have reserves and we have space for improvement. Now, basically, let's come to the current agenda. In our paper, we approached. We have had a slightly non-standard approach. We didn't base on the fact what kind of procedures are operating and used, although this should be the basis of our paper. But as a matter of fact, we approached from the point of view what could be a perfect model to provide execution of these global things. On one hand, this should be the state security or the efficiency of procedures from the point of view of protecting interests which are set by the government. And at the same time, simplicity, user-friendliness, and maybe cheap price, low cost for business. And being guided by multiple practices of other countries, or by processes related first and foremost to digitalization, which also is going on in our country. Now we believe that there are four main and key areas in the area of our procedures preventing from further high-quality development. First of all, that's the most disputable question which we've been discussing since 2012. We know the opinion of officials on this issue, but anyway, every time we stand up for it, these are issues of checking the correctness of customs payments prior to release of goods. We have an understanding still that if these procedures being postponed to the post-issue step, it would be easier to control them because there will be more time for control, and in this case, customs can connect data presented with the data which are available in the accounting of economic operations of the payer's company. And finally, in this case, customs may work not for the specific deal, but taking into account the whole economic activity of the company. Next story is multi-stage way of customs clearance. If we speak about customization of processes, if we state that today data in the digital form can be gathered for the goods to be imported even before they come to the customs territory. And we know that Federal Customs Service have the information exchange with other entities, with other customs departments, and have prior information about goods being imported to Russia. So fixing the importer and the goods being transported at the place of destination, on our opinion, makes such procedures excessive, such procedures as the internal customs transit, and even in more sense, it would allow us to get rid of such obsolete thing as the temporary warehouse, because the electronic declaration places is a clear thing, but we have a feeling that sometimes and very often, or even these temporary warehouses couldn't be replaced by the electronic customs turnover. Next thing is the point of customs control. Badges are normally linked to the customs declaration. And we also believe that the methodology of control could be changed, bringing it closer to customs to taxation methods, to the approach of period-based analysis. And in this case, I think the efficiency of these procedures could be higher. And the final thing is the risk management system, by the way. In every country, using customs control, selective control based on the risk management system, the approach is used like being oriented on subjects, on entities. But dear colleagues, we are all aware that these entities are being picked not by the current behavior or relations with customs or taxation bodies and their fairness status right here and now. It is basically fixed in the Kyoto Protocol. The entities who provide some simplification and things and minimize things, the main requirement to them is fairness and correctness of leading their accounting and their commercial operations. This is a key element of trust, and this is what allows the follow-up control to restore the whole story of import, and which allow us to work safely and to lessen control during the border crossing.
And basically, this is scope of issues which are outlined in the report. And what we would like to propose is the key thing of our proposal is to change business processes tied up with the customs processing of goods. What do I mean? Again, when we give up this multi-stage, multi-tier customs procedures, when on each stage you have to present your own batch of documents and information, then spend time on opening these documents and closing the documents and keeping the consignment on the temporary storage and opening internal transit and closing it. You know, this whole range of things. It's all additional time and money. But besides, it's transferring preliminary control and risk analysis and analysis of the risk rate of supplies before the batch or the goods will be imported into the country, and on the stage after you release the goods. And the term of the release of the goods in Europe are usually counted by minutes, and as soon as you finished the customs clearance, the process can take a year or so until the customs officers will make sure that all calculations of the customs payments have been made in the right way. But again, they do control not according to a single shipment, but in the context of the whole economic operations of a company. Next is the control, end-to-end control. We are especially concerned with the story of marking each unit of the shipment, because if the end-to-end control is based on digitalization, automation, then we do not quite understand why. For the purpose of controlling bodies, there is not enough information for analyzing information. There is not enough information for efficiency of control. Why do we need to control each unit of the merchandise? And what can this marking, this branding can do? I think that end-to-end control has to be ensured by the integration of information between customs, tax, and other bodies. And the starting point to find out information about the merchandise should be internal control of companies when they buy the merchandise and when they sell this merchandise or use it in their manufacturing cycles. Of course, the safety and security of the state when releasing the goods, before the obtaining payments, they should be insured by something. And we know these kind of technologies when there is a system of safety guarantee, would be financial guarantee, or what in Russian legislation is referred to as insurance for the payment of customs fees and duties. Basically, we are speaking that the current system which calls for an opportunity to use the general guarantees only when doing transit. It should be specified and updated. Again, if you'll be using experience of European countries, we will see that in European experience they use integrated or general guarantees which cover the whole activity of important party, and the size of this kind of guarantees is defined by the level of risks. A level of risk in terms of the avoidance of payments and impossibility of levying or getting these payments later. What's been done in the new customs legislation that for a company which is paying the taxes in the volume of 7 billion rubles, there is a release from this security of payment, assurance of payment. But comparing to the European experience, the release from the security of payment, they take into account not only financial capabilities and financial stability of a company who is paying taxes or customs fees, but also the fairness of their operations and what we've been speaking about, the lack of doubts in whether they do their accounting right, so that we could double check whether there is a correct payments for all the applications at the post control. And graphically, if this model of business processes will be put in a chart, in a flow chart, it looks like that in the upper line you would see the existing stages of the customs procedures with a short description of what you do and where you do it. In the bottom area you can see what could be instead as a result of implementing this new model. That is the release of good in the customs points, after identifying and after providing financial guarantees if needed, and then the whole control after acceptance of goods by the method of accounting. And basically, as a result of implementing this new system, we get rid of the transit time, we get rid of the temporary storage, we do the pre-declaration, we do the final release after the consignment has to be accounted for through simple accounting, and of course the system of financial guarantees. And basically, even if we look at the numbers which has been identified by Vladimir Ivanovich, and understand this is no more than 1.6% of actual inspection of goods and merchandise from the whole declaration volume, it doesn't quite make sense. Why do we need to keep all this merchandise and to take them through very complex procedures before we do the declarations and release of the goods? Why do we need to keep them in this quarantine or internal transit if still the main control is taking place based on the paperwork, based on the documents which are submitted in the process of declaration? Again, if we compare the proposals which had been formulated in the report with those key with the key positions of the effective documents, it looks like, as a matter of fact, for all these key areas which we've been discussing today, we have our own perspective. And first of all, we're speaking about the fiscal control in the context of the total scope of economic operations, which enables us to react on non-typical operations of the economic agent. We can react to some changes, possibly by lowering customs value and changing the number of SKUs which are submitted for inspections, which gives us more ground and more information for analyzing particular consignment and applying control. And in the context of the same slide, I also would like to draw your attention to one more thing. We think that within the risk management model, the efficiency evaluation should be done by different criteria, not based on the share of the customs payment which are paid, whether they are green or not, speaking about the foreign economic activities operators, but about the collectability, collection level, and trustworthy declaration. We believe that Russia has come to the point in its development when we have to develop our own methodological tools and instruments to measure shadow economy, to measure shadow business. And in our evaluation, all in all, if we implement these proposals, it can yield very positive results related not only to cutting down time for customs formalities and procedures, but also for improving Russia's stance in international ratings as well as increment in customs payments. Another thing, I would like to point out that in the presentation we have not only the fiscal part, of course, it's related to the activities of the customs agencies, but we've taken a broader look, and in general I have to say that even though the topic of our presentation is customs administration, but the customs administration, it's actually all regulatory requirements set to the carriers or foreign trade operators when they move merchandise across the customs border. And in our presentations we have some proposals about different aspects related to transit, related to e-document turnover. And I would like to point out that when it comes to the single window approach, one stop shop, we have to set more ambitious goals as they are formulated in the digital economy program. And we have to speak not only about automating certain processes and procedures, but have to move towards such a goal that each economic operator have to supply in electronic form some information. They have to supply it just once, just one time. And the customs officers have to use the information in such a form, in such a format which business will provide in a B2B format. This would be the electronic contracts, the consignment notes, and so forth. I also would like to say, looking at this slide, at the matter of transit of the goods. Why am I speaking about the transit? Because it is directly related to the activity of customs and other controlling bodies and supervisory authorities in checkpoints and customs zones. I believe that the simplification of a transit is hampered by two problems. Number one, infrastructure. Vladimir has been speaking about that, but also administrative formalities, which have to be eliminated. Do you all know that since 2013, Russia has been in a certain crisis state? Maybe I'm painting this very thick, but we speak about the MGP procedures. Half of the transit operations. I'm not lobbying this procedure and saying that this is perfect. In this procedure, I would like to point out that its key distinctions from national procedures is that to cross all transit states, you have to build a single customs document which is recognized at all territories of transit through which the merchandise is moving. This procedure is a single financial guarantee which is recognized by all customs authorities, and we think that no national procedure, however efficient it could be, cannot be a replacement or an alternative to these international agreements. And we are calling all the community that since this procedure needs some alternative mechanisms, so that while signing contracts with when we do the mutual recognitions of the customs documents as it is done in the Eurasian Economic Union territory, that we could create conditions for developing the transit. Thank you for your attention. I am done. Galina, thank you very much. And we are moving on to the next part of our discussion. Galina, could you please go back to that slide that you've shown just recently? And I wanted to discuss this within the next presentation. Actually, we can begin by saying that the problem of verification of the customs fees after the release, it's a problem number one, and second problem, guarantees. Maybe you could cover these issues. What is your take on what has been mentioned? Thank you. I would like to begin with the different things. The context of our discussion was such that there are a lot of problems in the customs administration, and the situation is getting actually worse. I would not say that, because customs offices are controlling the big volume of payment, and we cannot get rid of that because 6 trillion rubles are quite a heavy amount of money, and we cannot say that, okay, that customs authorities are not a fiscal authority. They are, actually. It's a fiscal body, and they define largely the revenues of the national budget. And we cannot say that it's not a main role of the customs. At least now, today, we cannot assert that. Secondly, we may have difference of opinions on ratings, because they're based on different principles. But even if we look at the doing business rating, and if we will see the Russia changing its position in this ranking, I think leaping forward by 41 point from 141 to 99. I believe that this should be the topic for our discussion, because I do not know has any other country in such a short period of time was able to move and jump through so many points. So I think we have to admit that, yes, in terms of the customs business, we do have successes. Of course, we have a lot of reasons to move up in different ratings, improving our operational activities and many other things. But I think we are not at the worst situation. You've even made comparisons with different countries of the world. I cannot say that we are doing like much worse than these other countries. It's the first point of my presentation, and I want to say that the customs service and bodies of Russia are definitely can be merited for this success. The second thing I would like to say, and Vladimir has been speaking about that, and then Timur, what is being done in customs service right now, namely the rebuilding business processes and implementing modern technologies, business processes, and moving the customs checkpoints onto the government-managed land lots. It creates the basic infrastructure for any subsequent change. And building the e-declaration centers and the e-customs centers eventually will enable us to use different tools for simplifications of customs procedures. But you first have to establish this infrastructure to do anything else. Maybe it will not enable us to cut down the time, but it's important as stage of informatization, digitalization, and automations. It takes time, definitely, but it is very important because even though it may not give us any immediate result. The third question, which gets a lot of coverage and a lot of attention, actually, Galina, in her presentation, she paid a lot of attention to that, is what shall we do with the stage of paying customs fees? When they should be paid, and how should we regulate them? Do they have to be paid before release and after the release of the goods? I believe, especially taking into account all I've mentioned, it's not the problem. It is not the immediate problem that we have to deal with right now. Because I will give you just one example. Let's suppose that tomorrow we take two decisions. Number one, we say yes, customs procedures and the release. It's one procedure, but you have to make your payments in a certain time frame. It's decision number one. And the second decision, instead, customs authorities 1 year after release of the goods can come back at any time into control in any way they want, because there is neither tax periods or nothing like that. They can supervise what's going on with the payment of these customs fees. And I think the business will be the first one to say, no, we don't like that, because we are staying in contact with the customs authorities before the goods will be released. But after they're released, we are not communicating with you, and we are not going to engage in all these procedures.
And the full-fledged follow-up control with all measurements, with searches, with inspections, and so on and so forth, with the suspension of operations on accounts, and we can't get rid of the situation, these operations. This is all provided. Same procedures as in tax control. They have to be here also. Only it's going to be the continuous control. They are going to go without limitations applicable in the tax legislation. So here, without implementing modern procedures of customs control, we shouldn't say that we need to bring in something and to strengthen the control. It would be quite risky. But on the other hand, with the development of modern administrative technologies, we may come on our own to naturally come to the solution to simplify procedures, such as the recent case. There was a solution in gross alcoholic regulation. Special excise bonds were provided under the warranties. There was a double warranty versus the excise warranty, which customs taxation bodies were taking for the alcoholic beverages. This is the basic instrument, and so on and so forth. And as soon as we implemented the mark-based new marking system, and the administrative bodies understood that if there should be some cases of illegal product, it should be turned off at some point, the Rosregulирование came to us and told us, let's think about getting rid of this double warranty, because with the licensing new technologies, we do not need it anymore, and we will submit such proposals for consideration in the nearest future. So, main thing, what I believe we should focus on in improvement of customs administration is what we discussed and what is partially included in the report, but maybe in slightly different order. In particular, this is the execution of the comprehensive program which has been approved. This is very important. Second thing we should start dealing with, and unfortunately we haven't done it yet, is junction of customs administration processes with the processes which the entity undergoes dealing with other controlling bodies. This is a very important thing, and it's not all of a sudden that doing business is not only customs, because the economic activity entity is the main actor of this whole system, irrespective of type of control. And out of all entities which carries out control at the border related to the international economic activity, and after the comprehensive modernization of tax authorities, this body will be the most advanced one, and the single window system can be built based on the customs example with all risk control, and this will allow to mitigate risks significantly related to the procedures in terms of external economic activity. Thank you very much. So you mean that we can go in two ways. Now we can change the procedure for post-control and other measurement of risky instead of green ones, or first go digital, look how it works, and then improve. This is a junction that you mentioned now, right? I think now we do not need, maybe there are other standpoints, but on my opinion, we should not stick to this customs payment. It's not the main thing. Moreover, if now we all will make a next step and do it, I believe we will only make it worse, based on the experience happened in other industries. But what is really a must, what is already done, is been on the way: digitalization, creation of digital business processes, document turnover, document mechanism. This first. And the second thing, well, we should start. And it's not only the responsibility of the Minister of Finance, we obviously should take it to ourselves. Combine procedures related to transport administration with customs control, combine it and unify it in a single system. We started with Timur this process a year ago. We had an instruction from the government. Unfortunately, we didn't go too far because he moved from Ministry of Finance to the Ministry of Ideas. We hope still that we will finish this issue, and we can set it as a goal to this year, since there is no single leader who could take the task of changing both transport legislation and other types of legislation in other areas, but still it could be done, and it would allow to even move even higher in all ratings. Thank you. Pavel Anatolievich, since you swapped with Vitaly Yurievich, you have the floor now. Thank you very much. I have to say that I really like this discussion, and just take a look whether it was possible just some years ago, when we have Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economics in one stage, and in the first row we see leaders and deputies of maybe not all, the majority of agencies and ministries. When there is a need to rebuild the service, like changing parts of a plane on the fly, people still find time to come and to discuss together with experts, together with business, and they find time to discuss quite disputable and provocative visions and standpoints. It's very correct not to focus on current things, but to allow some visionary approach, some fantasy, some part of fantasy, because our world is changing quickly. And if we would set the only current tasks, we won't be able to catch up with the changes which are going on. I listened to the presentation of the World Doing Business report for 2018, and experts mentioned the following. They involved administrations from practically all over the world, and everyone started to make changes to the legislation to be attractive in terms of investment and get higher ranking in terms of doing business. And it happened in many countries. And they say that with the low base effect, the dynamics of different countries is really impressive. In this regard, what we demonstrated, we showed the dynamics of 40 places. We think maybe that it's not what we wanted. We are still aware that we are not, we haven't reached the target. But even to stand on place, we need to run very fast. That's our world now. And with regard to what I mentioned now, and with regard to that, what happens, we do not stand on the ground. We are moving. I hope that the Federal Federal Customs Agency is in a transitional period. If you remember physics, if you heat up somebody, you need some time, and you see sometime temperature will stay unchanged, some volume of energy will be accumulated, and we're building the base, which from the point of view of infrastructure should be improved afterwards and upgraded, but this base is absolutely necessary to ensure smart regulation, to ensure following up information streams, and intervene where it's necessary and not where we have an obstacle or a barrier. The whole world is now evidencing the phase transition. Trade is changing. You all see the open platforms on this forum. You see how transformations are going on and being potentially disruptive for many industries. On the customs forum, we discussed and mentioned that before understanding the regulation, we need to understand what kind of trade we will have, because the share of intellectual property growing in the trade, adaptive technologies maybe will transport not goods, but just raw materials or powders, and to print everything on the location, on the site, and take just royalty for the design. And well, we absolutely need such sessions. We need such visionary sessions, and it's very good that the customs service and the management of and the Ministry of Finance is involved in these stories. From the point of view of the idea of Vitaly Yurievich about creating conditions, when we speak about digital transition and digital document turnover, moving away from paper to digital, we mention a concept which is cautiously realized now, but practical experts see a trend towards this decision. When there is a data pipeline, when business and regulator exchange not even digital documents, but elements of data. If you may, you can call it a matrix, where as authors of this paper wrote, there should be initial documents from the business, absolutely transparent for the regulator, and you shouldn't create any additional forms, data libraries, whatever. You should take as maximum as possible from what you've got, because it's hardly possible for any business to find that would have all the accountings on paper. They have all more or less developed information systems. They do use them, and not a snapshot of the current situation is needed, but process is needed, and smooth movement of the process is required. Cost of data transfer from one entity to another entity, and we can elaborate on the fact that not Rospotrebnadzor or customs would give a go, but they will just follow up what happens, and if there is any questions to the procedure, they will ask for comments and explanations. And if this system is created, and if it is clear, transparent, and well working, so we will have a success. Where do we get this unfair and fair business distinction? When the costs for unfair business conduct bring more profit, and there is a temptation to play somehow with these things. And but if we create systems and behavioral models, and everyone would understand that it's much easier to be transparent, to be available, you won't have any problems in your current activities. So, or maybe those state signals will provide the behavioral model which would be of demand and implemented by the business into the current environment. I absolutely agree with my colleagues, and I'm very pleased to hear that everyone accepts the idea that we should improve something in the customs administration. But the biggest potential sits in the comprehensive approach, of course. This is the value stream, the information stream, and all systems, all risk systems should be embedded in the process. There shouldn't be many stops and controls. That it should be a comprehensive system based on digital technologies. The single window we mentioned many times already. We need to involve as many regulators as possible here, because the Federal Customs Service provides all preconditions for this. And the only question is lies not on the level of the Ministry of Economic Development. It should be a full-fledged governmental program with a high level of authorization and leadership to be able to do this. But in principle, for such country as Russia, with its involvement in the world trade systems, with those plans which we set for the development of export and economic activity, it is really needed. Thank you. We have 10 more minutes and a few questions only. I would like to ask them to Ilya Vyacheslamovich. We discussed customs predominantly, but there was a task to create the comprehensive mechanism of administering customs and tax payments. A lot of things were done here, common use of data, and what happens next? What comes next? What's the next step? Well, I understand the political context when this decision was made. Since that time, a lot of things were made. Yes, you're right. And indeed, we continue this job. One of the final decisions made on the Eurasian level and on our internal Russian level in the very end of last year. I don't very like the word of documentary follow-up because it makes some references to marking, but that's not just marking. It means using data of consignment documents about the merchandise from the moment of its import to the territory of Eurasian Union to the point of its sales. On one hand, this belongs to this digitalization process because it's completely based on electronic invoices, and on the other hand, it is about creating a system of control or supervision over the goods movement in the process of all possible operations and activities on the territory of Eurasian Union. We start a pilot to implement documentary follow-up this year with regard to creating of necessary infrastructure. In December, a proper agreement was approved on the level of Eurasian Economic Commission. It was sent to the relative departments, and we hope this year it's going to be signed and the process will be launched. This follow-up system is impregnation and embodiment of the single mechanism of administration of all customs and tax payments, because the data from customs authorities received during the customs procedures can be followed up in the process of taxation administration without special data exchange procedures. And this is the main track, maybe, along which the implementation of this mechanism will go. My next question, it's very concerning for me and sometimes surprising, is marking. Well, I already mentioned that in different places, on different platforms. Marking is a strange thing. It's not even 20th century, it's 19th century and earlier. Of course, excise liable goods, yes, all countries use different markings, different systems, but even here, we would see here moving away from physical marking because it's not needed in the modern digital society. What Yuri Vyacheslamovich told us about the following up documents of digital follow-up, this is a way and not a physical marking, on my opinion. There's huge money there, and no one needs that. Pay taxes or duties to follow up the whole chain from the grains to and then the food chain of the cattle, then to the irrigation system, and then again to the same cattle through wheat. Well, it's not needed for administration, this full chain, for fiscal bodies, what happens to goods. And anyway, this system wins over the brains of masses. The number of goods is expanded for marking. A question to you, then please, will you comment on this? I personally agree with you. That's my answer. Short and precise and clear. May I say a few words, please? Again, we put it like this. as marking is bad. But there are different standpoints to this issue. For instance, excise liable goods and goods with a higher value, with a high risk of counterfeiting and deviations or distortions, high risk for health, like medicine goods, and they be marked, and there's nothing special there. Moreover, modern technologies, such as the most important ones in process of being developed there, they allow to make these marking mechanisms less costly in terms of time and in terms of money, of course. For example, yesterday there were news in news portals that the new marking system, which is being tested in tobacco industry, theoretically later on can replace special excise, special stickers system. Well, I think it's nothing. There's nothing bad. There's new technology, and the question and the issue, the statement that everything should be marked. No, there's no statements like this. The appetite comes during the meal. First shoes, then something else. It's all strange.
Nevertheless, well, maybe we do not have everybody involved in this process. When you speak about the fiscal and customs procedures, we don't see any risks. Maybe you speak about the overalls, you speak about the rubber shoes. Well, maybe some industries are interested. Before Vladimir will sum up our discussion, I would like to ask Vitaly. Would you like to refer to any of the statements about the risk management, about the transit, about anything else? Would you like to say a couple of words as the representative of the business community? All we need is love. That was the idea. And we have to think. I'm not saying about the move away from the fiscal function by the customs authorities, but I'm saying in addition to doing the fiscal tasks, you have to do it for business, and you have to enable business to make as much money as possible within the effective legislation. I think we have to just think about that a little bit more. And we have great people here in the panel and in the audience, the deputy heads and other ladies and gentlemen. But in the local regions, it's a little bit different because the regular customs inspectors, they have different ideas and concept. They're thinking about the transit, they're thinking about the taxes. If we speak about the transit, I've been asked to touch upon that. I believe that the customs is not a problem, because when our trains are passing to the Trans-Siberian with a speed 27 kilometers per hour on average, 2 weeks, it takes one train to cover the distance. Just imagine that. In seaports, if you're overtaking the seaports by 1 or 2 days, it's not even matter. But the railway system is loaded to capacity. But again, we have to do all it takes. You have to do your best as job as you can right where you are. Speaking about the ports, the customs is not the main problem, but even the simple things like to get your items from the temporary storage only after you make all the amendments in your customs declarations, and be the city of Novorossiysk and the money or the Far East, it made for money, and the cargo is being delayed by a day or two. It's not the problem of customs. Customs authorities are exactly doing all they can. But I agree with Sergei, because the only way for customs is to be in charge of all these matters. And so that the customs would introduce the rules which would be beneficial for a business. Because what's going on today, how can we develop a transit? Don't even get me started. And I think globally speaking about these issues, it's a right way to go. What is missing, and I've mentioned about that, is just a moral mindset by all the stakeholders. And speaking about the procedures, we have to keep working, a lot of little details that have to be fixed. And also I would like to thank Kalina for her presentation. I've read this presentation and think there's a lot of great ideas in her presentation, and these ideas definitely will be good for the Federal Customs Service, good for Russia, and I think this presentation has to be circulated more widely. I've also read this presentation, and I've tried to share in my presentation. This is not about the customs payments at all, because you have a lot of reasonable and ideas and quality analysis in this presentation for other sides of the business. Vladimir, could you please wrap up our session? Maybe you will touch upon some issues and topics which have been highlighted. First of all, I would like to say that today we've had very constructive dialogue, very constructive discussions of different issues related to customs administration. And Vitaly, you're absolutely correct, because someone mentioned about fantasies. We have to replace fantasies with ideas. Ideas are very correct, but the whole point is to implement these ideas in a timely manner. Sure, we can attribute all the payments to the post-control time. And generally, it's not a question for customs, it's a question for the government, because customs is now speaking against this innovation. And I'll say why. Because when we have 47% of the payments that we impose on the post control, and 97% in the pre-control, and that's the difference. So we've agreed with the business that the climate in customs business declared by two factors: first, foreign economic activities operators and the applicants, and secondly, basically the customs. So it's about normalizing this climate. It's the trying to accommodate each other halfway. And we also have to keep in mind that our business is still very young in the country. Last year we celebrated 25 years of free economic activities and entrepreneurship in Russia. It has a long way to go, and we're hoping that there'll be a new, better legislation in customs field. And so far, regrettably, every year we can see that we have more and more administrative violations. An increment of these violations this year was 20,000 administrative cases, and this is a big reason for concern. We also have to have, speaking about these novelties in our legislation, that first of all, we are working in a single customs union, and we're not the only country in this union, and we absolutely have to take into account our partners in the union. And on top of that, it's a known thing that in the Russian Federation we have the systems of bans, limitations, which encompasses 46% of different cargo categories, merchandise categories. We have to also think about that, but generally I have to say that these ideas which have been presented and articulated today in different presentations will give a boost to our deliberations, to our next actions, and this dynamic which is being demonstrated by the customs authorities in Russia when it comes to automatic registration, automatic declaration, and release of goods, will give us the opportunity to put in practice all these proposals, for example, which have been now articulated by Galina. We still have one issue, the issue which we will deal with as soon as we can. It's a issue of reconfiguring the risk management system, readjusting the risk management system, because we are under conviction that we have to move from the categorizing the economic operators into categorizing merchandise and goods, which are to be declared. But it's quite a complex issue, because as of today, assigning categories is being done well in advance, assigning categories to consignments will have to be done in online mode, and when you do evaluation of an e-declaration, we have to be ready for that. And I'm asking you, please understand me correctly, now we are in a difficult transitional stage, and I do not want to aggravate this process by other transitional processes which come on top of that. So the logic of what we're doing is that, first of all, before 2020, we want to put into practice the integrated program for development of the Federal Customs Service, and after 2020, we'll begin launching this 2030 strategy that we have been working on right now. And I once again would like to invite all of you to be a part of this process. Thank you. Thank you, Vladimir. Thank you to all the participants. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.